Okay, we are live. It's been a few weeks since I've done one of these events, so we were doing them so regularly for a while and had my whole little thing all set up. And tonight I was like, wow, where's my light? I need to set some things up. All right, I always try to give everybody just a couple minutes to log into Facebook and YouTube, and luckily Facebook is working tonight, unlike yesterday. So that was a fun issue for all the folks who work on social media. So, all right, and then we've got some folks here. So we are going to get started. I'm Amber. I work at One More Page Books here in Arlington, Virginia, and one of the good things about being able to do all these virtual events is we get to not only reach people from all over the place, but bring in authors from all over the place. So one of our authors tonight is local, but one is out in Colorado. So nice that we're able to bring you both together as well. I will introduce our authors in just one second, but just want to let folks know who are online. You are welcome to comment or ask a question. If you're on Facebook, you just do that in the Facebook comments. If you're on YouTube, use the live chat, and we will be able to see whatever we have coming in. We will take some questions towards the end of the hour. Feel free to go ahead and pop questions in anytime whenever you have a question, and we will get to as much as we can, probably around 7:40, 7:45 East Coast time. I know not everyone is on East Coast time, especially everybody here. So let me do some quick introductions. Olivia Blacke writes the Brooklyn murder mysteries, including No Memes of Escape, which was released today. Yay, happy pub day. Her books are quirky, unconventional, and character-driven cozy mysteries. She's lived all over the US, but now we're lucky she currently resides here in the DC area. And in addition to writing, reading, and spending way too much time on social media, like all of us, she also enjoys scuba diving, crocheting, collecting tattoos, and baking dog cookies for her puppy, who's already made a backstage appearance, who may make another appearance later. And I also want to welcome Kate Lansing, who writes the Colorado wine mysteries, and her newest, Mulled to Death, is going to come out in a couple of weeks. So we're glad that she could be here for sort of a pre-release event. Kate is an award-winning short story author. Her work has appeared in the Brave New Girls anthology and Crossing Colfax anthology, and she lives in Denver with her daughter and husband and their tabby cat. So welcome to both of our authors. I do want to pop up, and I just lost my screen. There we go. Because I don't have the books in my hands, I just wanted to do a quick show and tell. So Olivia's book, No Memes of Escape, which she's going to come into One More Page tomorrow to sign copies. So if you haven't ordered yours yet, you can still do that tonight, and she'll sign that for you. And then we look forward to getting our copies of Mulled to Death into the bookstore. And Kate has generously sent ahead some signed book plates. So if you do order those from us, you'll get her nice sticker signature inside the book. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you guys. It sounds like you have a fun conversation planned, so I'm going to sit back and enjoy with everybody else.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Amber. So I guess Amber actually gave us a really good starting point where she was talking about the signed book plates. And obviously, we're both got books coming out during a pandemic, and your book was originally supposed to be today. We were both going to launch on the same day and have a party together and everything. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with your book and when it is going to come out?
Yeah, so today was the original pub date, but due to the supply chain issues that I don't know if everybody's been hearing about that, there were some printing delays, and so it will be out October 19th, which is 2 weeks from today. But you know what? I don't know. I debuted in May 2020 with my first book, and you just kind of learn how to roll with it. And I'm just excited it's coming out in a couple weeks, and I can't wait for everybody to get to read the story and to be able to share that. So yeah.
And I did have a chance to read an advance copy, and I absolutely loved it. And the 2 weeks gives people more time to pre-order it so they get it on time. So
yes.
If y'all are listening and you haven't pre-ordered it, this is a good time to pre-order it. Get it from One More Page, get the book plate, good to go.
Absolutely. Just builds anticipation, right?
So do you want to start with a little teaser of Mulled to Death, a summary or something?
Yeah, well, Mulled to Death is the third book in the Colorado Wine Mystery series, and the first two books take place in Boulder. The protagonist, the main character Parker, has a winery, Vino Valentine, and the third book sort of departs from that. Her and her best friend and her boyfriend and her brother, who the best friend and brother are dating. I should say that, it makes it less less awkward. But they sort of fly the coop and go to the mountains for a weekend getaway, and over Valentine's Day weekend. And of course, things do not go as planned. Murder and mayhem disrupt everything. They just follow Parker wherever she goes. And yeah, so that's sort of the overarching premise. Parker goes on this vacation hoping to mix a little business with pleasure, and unfortunately gets sucked into an investigation. So I also was so lucky to get to read an early copy of No Memes of Escape. And I just have to say that's still maybe one of my all-time favorite cozy mystery titles. The pun. Okay, and I have to know, I'm already deviating from what we said we were going to talk about.
Go for it.
Did you come up with that title? Because it is so amazing.
So yes, actually I did. My agent and my editor and I sat down virtually, and we were throwing things out, and we were trying to see what stuck. And the original title they absolutely hated. So we just started throwing out stranger and stranger titles until I said, well, fine, No Memes of Escape. That's not going to get anywhere. And as soon as I said it, we all went, oh, wait, write that one down. So that's what
brilliant.
stuck. But yeah, I mean, like it, you know how like sometimes you just get punch drunk at the end of a writing session and you're just throwing things against the wall. And that's what came out. And we were all like, yeah, okay, we like this.
It works.
I love it. Because it is an escape room, and there's this strong internet connection throughout all the Odessa books. So she does use Twitter to do investigations. She uses Instagram to do investigations, and the fact that there are these memes that keep popping in throughout the book, it just kind of worked.
Oh, I think it works so well, because one of your subplots that I loved was like your Odessa works at a bookstore / restaurant / cafe.
Yeah, it's just like a little cafe, and it's got a couple of tables, and they've got craft beer because it's Brooklyn. So one of the things that I like to do is in the kitchen, I've got a chef called Parker. And Parker always comes up with these recipes that are absolutely delicious. And they're all inspired by meals I've had at some restaurant or another. So going back over this book during a pandemic, when I can't get to those restaurants, I'm just like, oh, that's such a good meal.
Yes. I was like drooling over all of your food descriptions. And it was so fun because they were things like vegan egg salad. And I'm like, wow, she made this sound like something I just want to eat right now. And it was kind of like, it was so fresh and unique. And it was just, it gave such a great, I don't know, visual and just idea of where the place was, of the setting. And it was just so good.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned my chef Parker, and whenever I opened your book, the first thing, I think it's like the first paragraph of Mulled to Death is Parker turns to Reed and says, and I'm like, okay, so I've got a character named Parker Reed. You've got a character named Parker and a character named Reed. And then I find out a minute later that Reed is a chef and my Parker Reed is a chef. And I'm like, yeah, I think we're going to get along just fine.
Oh, yeah. It was such a fun, such a happy coincidence to discover that. And so how do you go about naming your characters?
So the main character is obviously the first one I name, and I love vowel sounds. And I don't know if it's just because my name starts with an O, but I found out a long time ago, like all of my main characters for the longest time always had vowel beginnings of their names. And then I like to throw in like little Easter eggs. And it's not necessarily that somebody is like inspired by something, but there could be like an actor or a character or quite often a hockey player that comes into my book just by using their name. So Odessa Dean, I don't know, like, I know you're a nerd girl, so maybe you'll get this reference. I chose it because Odessa Sam didn't have the right ring to it. So maybe you'll figure that out. Maybe you won't.
Right. I don't know. It doesn't, not immediately. Anytime. I'm going to figure it out. But I love it.
And yourself, how do you pick out the names? Like I love the name Parker, and I love that your character is a Parker.
Yeah, I think it's funny when I go to name characters, like I have a 4-year-old daughter. It's almost like naming a child, right? Like this fictional like person. And Parker, I was coming up with a long list of names, and Parker just had such a ring to it of like being somewhat hip but business minded, and it just kind of fit her as I was working through who she was and her voice. I will say something I always pay attention to whenever I'm naming characters, especially working on subsequent books like 2 and 3, are syllables of character names. So you want to be careful never to have too many characters that start with a P, like Parker, right? Because you don't want to muddle things up or confuse the reader. But in addition to that, I'm always paying attention to syllables. So like, it's interesting for you. I immediately was like, Olivia, 3 syllables. Odessa, 3 syllables. Because I find by varying up both, like it's like I have to pay attention to both. So it's coming up with what name actually fits a character and their backstory, but also making sure they don't sound too similar, both to other characters.
Yeah, I definitely, I see the first and the last name as it's got to fit together, because you get somebody like Madeline Washington. That's too many syllables for me. But like Maddie Jones might not be too many. So I mean, it's always fun to play with that.
Yeah. And then there's always the Google search after you come up with a perfect character name to make sure it doesn't sound perfect because they're actually famous or exist in real life and you just forgot about them, because that's happened to me.
I can imagine. I think I Googled somebody once and they're like this famous Olympic swimmer or something. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to use that name. Everybody knows that person already. Let's mix it up just a little bit.
Yeah.
So beyond our characters' names, our Cozies have a lot in common. We both write in first person, which apparently isn't, I hadn't noticed this before, but had a couple of people pointed out it's not big in Cozies to write in first person. So we both have younger main characters instead of the woman of a certain age that some mysteries have. And we both have a lot of tech in ours. I know at one point, and I love this, you have Parker lost connection to the internet because she's up on a mountain, there's a snowstorm. And so there's a good excuse for why she doesn't have the internet. But do you ever worry that like 5 or 10 years, people are going to be reading our books and be like, Google, really? Who uses that old thing anymore?
I don't worry about that as much these days, although a little bit. So there are things that have been technology that's been a mainstay in life now for like a decade, right? And I don't know that that's things maybe come in and out of fashion, but for the most part, I don't worry too much about using Google or Instagram or Twitter or things trending, partly because one of my goals is to write a cozy mystery geared towards slightly younger audiences. Like you talked about, our protagonists are both slightly younger. And I wanted it to feel fresh. And I wanted it to include those things that are such, I throw around slang all the time on Twitter, it's trending and hashtags and all of that. And I wanted to include it. And I guess I think some of the technology has proven to that it's here to stay. And so I don't worry too much about that. But do you?
So my big concern is always I read a book that was published 2 years ago and it has lines like, oh, he pulled out his flip phone. And I'm just like, man, that it just jumps out at you.
Yeah.
And it scares me that, okay, we didn't have any Instagram or Facebook yesterday. And what if it never came back? And so anytime that you read anything from now on that mentions Instagram or Facebook, you're like, oh, that was pre-2021.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's what scares me.
Oh, well, it's fair. Well, and I think something that is interesting, I'll call this out too, just and especially I'm writing book 4 right now, but it's been a decision. I'm not going to include the pandemic in Parker's world. And so already the world feels slightly separate. And it's like, and it was a decision between my editor and me. And it's just interesting. There are things that you kind of say, this is my fictional world. So even if Facebook or Instagram go away, I still think social media, that concept will be around. And I'm hesitant to use things like Clubhouse or some of these other platforms that maybe haven't been around as long. And I don't know. It's like they have to prove that they're here to stay for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I use Discord a lot. I probably use Discord more than I use anything else at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it doesn't have the same familiarity as
Mm-hmm.
like Twitter does
Mm-hmm.
for the majority of my audience.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it is what it is.
Someday these could be historical fiction, but right now nice and fresh, right?
with as quickly as things change, this is going to be historical fiction like next week, and somebody's going to be like, "Oh, I don't know, they put the Instagram button on the wrong side of the dress," just like with the historical people. People really have feelings. So back to the books. I was talking to a friend the other day. She was looking for some cozy mystery recommendations, and I might have actually called you the Reincarnation of Agatha Christie. And I did this because you have a scene in the book, and I'm not going to ruin it for anybody, but the whole thing is so Agatha Christie. It's just absolutely perfect. I was smiling the whole time I'm reading this book. And then I get to this just absolutely perfect scene. I'm grinning from ear to ear because I know that you have set this up so well. But if you were going to recommend a cozy to somebody who doesn't read cozies, what would you recommend? How would you have them start?
How'd I have him start? It's such a hard question because and you were so sweet to say that, because thank you. And I'm glad it made you smile, because that's like the best compliment.
So good.
I think I have a lot of go-to recommendations, and I've had some friends, especially with all of the chaos of the last couple of years, kind of saying, what are some cozies? Like, what would you recommend? If I tend to like, if somebody is really into historicals, and I sense that, it would be like Tasha Alexander's Lady Emily series. If they're up for like a hip or more modern book, it would be yours, probably, all of the cool young references. I just think it's so fun. I also love Vivian Chan's Noodle Shop mysteries.
Yes.
I love Lindy Walker's Headlines in High Heels was one that inspired me a long time ago. And I thought, this is so good. And then, I call this one, this isn't technically a cozy. I call it a gateway cozy, because I think anyone who reads it will want to read more. But Louise Penny's Gamache series, Inspector Gamache. I got hooked on those Three Pines books. I am all the way up to date, and I'm just kind of heartbroken. I wish I had more. Just keep writing those. So those are just a few that. There's so many more. Ellery Adams' Book Retreat Mystery Series.
Yes.
There's so many good.
Oh yeah.
For book nerds.
I love all of the books that are based in libraries or that are based in bookstores, and just kind of it's comfortable, because I spend so much time in libraries. I spend so much time in bookstores, and it's nice being able to read in that setting, because some of the cozy mysteries, like, you feel like you can travel with them because they're set in England, or they're set in like this cute little B&B on the coast somewhere, and then you just got the bookstore one and you're just like, I'm home.
Totally. I love traveling through reading, and cozies offer that so much. They offer the quaint little village and the quirky cast of characters. I just love it. No, the bookstore ones and any book themed ones are just so fun. Yeah.
Definitely.
There's always like a cat that's named, Agatha or, or something.
I absolutely love the fact that you've got a book where your character travels away from home, doesn't bring her cat, and instantly makes best friends with the local cat, who turns out to be a huge character in the book. That was cute.
Well, there's got to be a pet, right? I mean, it's like cozy law. There has to be a pet. And I didn't really want Parker. Well, Parker and Reed both have cats. And I thought if they both bring their cats, it's too much cat for one for one hotel room for one weekend. So let's make when I was in New York City a long time ago, we stayed at the Algonquin Hotel for fun. And there is a hotel cat that resides there, and there's different cats now, of course, but it's been decades. It's this sort of like tradition, and I remember seeing the cat there, and that's what it first came into my mind of, like, a resort cat. That's it. There's going to be a cat there that and Parker and cats, just they're opposite ends of the magnet. Yeah, and you have a cat in yours too, which I love that the cat has such a role in why Odessa is in Brooklyn.
So if you haven't read the books, or if someone's listening and hasn't read the books, Odessa's aunt has a cat named Rufus, and Rufus is just this cute little, like, almost the dog-like cat, and which is funny because I have a cat-like dog, so I did that on purpose. And her aunt is actually kind of tricking Odessa, because Odessa has lived in this little tiny town in Louisiana for her whole life. She's always kind of dreamed of seeing the world, but she never does anything about it. And so her aunt almost manufactures a reason for her to come to New York. She's like, she could have anybody watch the cat, but she's like, Odessa, you have to come stay at my apartment for 3 months while I tour Europe. So Odessa's like, okay, family obligations. And she gets there, and like, her eyes are open, and she becomes part of the big city, and she never would have done that if it weren't for the cat. So
it's brilliant. It's such a way to hook the cat in there, and the cat sort of like, I love it, and I love that subplot in the second one. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but I loved that Odessa's sort of faced with, in this one, does she go home or does she stay? Because her aunt sort of comes back unexpectedly, and I loved. You had so many different layers in your mystery. It wasn't just the murder mystery. There was just, does she stay? Does she go? And I don't know, and friendship, and I loved it. And okay, can we talk about the escape room? And you did. Well, I loved it because it's a fun modern twist on the locked room mystery.
That's exactly what I was going for. And escape rooms are fun, and they're something that doesn't really work during a pandemic, but you're trying to figure out a mystery. So to throw a mystery inside the mystery is where the challenge came from. And luckily, my best friend is a escape room junkie. Him and his husband have done like hundreds of escape rooms, and so there's a couple of lines that are almost directly from something that they said as like a throwaway. As I think there's a line in there that, I had to climb into a coffin one time to get a clue, and that was horrible. And that's my friend James. He was just like, I had to climb into a sarcophagus once to get the clue, and you have to lock the sarcophagus in order to get the next clue. And it's things like that I was able to use their knowledge. And even my friend Darren has worked in escape rooms. And so he was able to give me some behind the scenes of how they actually work, and how, without giving anything away, how I could actually make this physically happen. I've had a lot of people go, oh, you can't actually do it that way. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. But you can. And having that knowledge of not just like being able to play an escape room, and you get so focused and you're doing a goal, you're doing a game, but to have somebody talk to you about the mechanics was so valuable.
Oh, I'm sure. I love it whenever I've been able to get a resource like somebody.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. And I've actually never done an escape room, although your book weirdly made me feel like I wanted to try one day. Like, I don't know if that's
you should
odd to say because a murder happened while they were in there, but I really do. I really want to try one now. I was like, man, these clues, this sounds like so much fun. So have you done one?
So I haven't done a lot, but I've done one, and I could even, write it off as research at this point, which is great. And it's different to go into and try to figure out an escape room, and then go in and you're like, okay, how would I set up these clues? And I got to admit, I did an escape room that I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the mechanics of it, I'm looking at how everybody is reacting, and everybody's like, are you going to help? And I'm like, I'm helping, I'm thinking, go away. I probably didn't get a single clue because I was just watching everybody else and seeing how they worked.
Like, yeah.
It's fun.
It sounds fun. I want to do one. Yeah.
As soon as you can, I highly recommend it.
And that's awesome. And it's just such a great, I don't know, it was such a fun way to call that mystery trope out. We both have tropes that we leaned into. So is this your favorite mystery trope?
It's one I've always wanted to do. My absolute favorite trope, and I don't think I'll ever do it because I don't know that I could do it as well as it's been done, is when you find out that the killer is actually the person you thought was dead. I love that trope, but I don't think I'll ever write it because that's hard.
That is hard. Yeah. For a while that is hard to do.
What's your favorite? What do you want to do?
Well, this was one that I wanted to do, was the grand, which I'll say,
yes,
I lean into one. I can say there's a grand reveal, and it's my favorite. In all of the Perrault novels, he gathers everybody together in one room, and then he slowly says, well, it wasn't you, and it wasn't you. And he kind of works through. And I just love those. And I haven't seen them done as often. And I just, like in more modern mysteries, and I wanted to try it. Thought, why not?
So actually, in Killer Content, I was originally intending to do a grand reveal, and I set it up where I got all of the people on a roof of a building, actually, and it didn't work, and I kept trying, and so finally I used that as a scene, but I never did it as a grand reveal. I couldn't get it to work. So I'm so happy that he did.
It was hard, and it took some finesse. Who is the detective who would allow that to happen? Since we're dealing with amateur sleuths. I mean, Perrault is like a private investigator, so of course it made more sense. But that was
I love that your cop was this female who was just absolutely no nonsense, but she got along with Parker. She wasn't, oh, stay out of my town. I loved your cop.
Oh, thank you. I kept picturing Starbuck from Battlestar when I was going for inspiration. I was like, in the somewhat newer one, from years ago now. But it was really important that and you have this too, when the amateur sleuth and the detective aren't butting heads all the time, but they're not, it's like they're on the same side. And like, for you did have that through Izzy, I think. Like, it's not like it was Odessa versus your detective. It was like they did work together. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you see that where the detective is always going, well, you stay out of it. And I like it sometimes when the detectives and the amateur sleuth, there's a little more meat to the relationship, a little more depth.
And in both Killer Content and No Memes, I've got Detective Costello, who's just is incredibly hot.
He sounds very dreamy at first.
Yes, he really does. Yes. And I love that he sticks around and he's part of the plot, but he's not, stay out of my investigation. He's, hey, I care about you guys. I don't want you getting hurt, but man, that's a good clue you just dug up. So.
Exactly. And he's a competent detective. Like, he tracks them down at one point in the book, and you're like, well, of course he did. This is great. I don't want
because I don't write the small town. This is New York City. So you can't be the bumbling cop. We're about to have a visitor up here. You can't be the little bumbling cop and still be in New York City. So Bailey, say hi to everybody. She has to join us. So the settings of our books I set mine in New York. You set yours in Colorado.
Mhm.
And this one is set in a ski resort in Colorado,
Mhm.
which is so much fun because, like we talked about earlier, on the traveling, you get to go to a new location and you get to go skiing without breaking anything or being freezing. Uh, what inspired you to set your series in Colorado?
Well, Colorado. So I'm a Colorado native, and I've grown up here, and I love it. And so the first two books are in Boulder, which is has such a quirky vibe, and it's such a unique place. And that's where I lived for a number of years. It's where I met my husband, and we fell in love, and we got married. I went to college there, had my first apartment, and so there's this part of me that always has been a little bit rooted there. And when I was looking for a setting for this cozy series, it was definitely like it has to be Boulder. Which is so, and then and it is a Colorado wine series. And I will say there are actually wineries in Boulder where they get the grapes from Grand Junction, or Palisade technically, which is just on the western slope of the Rocky Mountains. And so you get the grapes from growers over there, they bring them in trucks, and there are wineries that do that. And I thought, this is such a cool thing. And so that was sort of the groundwork. And then going into the third book, in every book, I want to showcase different gems of Colorado, both for people who are local that read the series. They're able to say like, oh, look she's talking about Union Station in Denver, or whatever. And then in this book, I knew I wanted to talk about, something that Colorado's famous for is our skiing and our ski resorts in the mountains. And I thought, what a fun little, I don't know, it's a fun departure and a fun vacation destination, cozy. And so that's what made me want to set it there. And I think that the world of ski resorts is so interesting too, and rife with conflict. There's these land development debates, and there's just a tons of stuff. And I thought this is cool. Not to mention, it's very cozy
Yes.
in feeling, like the ice sculptures and the twinkling lights and the snow.
And the hot cocoa and the mulled wine.
It's very, very cozy. And I love that having Parker is somewhat sporty. And so it was a fun way too to show her like skiing, even though she's about as skilled as I am, which is to say not very much, but we still have fun.
Good.
Anyway.
So with all the wineries that you have, how horrible is it doing all that research?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. No, that's one of the fun. I think all of the research for mysteries is just kind of fascinating. Like, I even toured a jail for book 2 because Reed ends up in jail for a little bit, and I just find some of this stuff. So it's so fascinating to me to get to experience these things and see different parts of the world, and just to expand my worldview through some of the research I get to do. But yeah, the wine is definitely a perk, I've gotten to go and, for research reasons, go and tour the back of a winery to see at harvest time, what does it actually look like, so that I can show Parker, and what are some of the tools that they use, and the chemistry, and how does it smell. I always think there are these things that you pick up when you go to places, and one of them is the smell. It smells jammy. And as many YouTube videos as you can watch, you can't smell. And I don't know. Yeah.
And it's hard to incorporate smells into a book. But if you're walking down a city street, you're going to smell exhaust and, the things you smell when you walk past a subway station. And whenever you spend a lot of time in the kitchen at this resort, and you're setting up your wine, and they're setting up all these different dishes, and you've got some great conflict because you've got the people at the kitchen don't get along with the ride operators, and the ride operators don't get along with the front desk person. And I love all this conflict, but in the meantime, whenever you're walking around, you've got the smell of the pine trees, or you've got the smells from the kitchen. So you do a really good job at putting scent into your book, and that's not easy.
Thank you. I was trying to draw on all of the senses when writing, because I think whenever I'm reading, that's what brings a book to life. And I think you did that really well too. And one thing too, I thought you handled so well is you made Brooklyn feel like a tight-knit community. Like it felt, Cozies, it's like, you have to have that a little bit. And I thought you did such a great job in this unique setting, I would say, for a cozy series, of still bringing that community feeling to your book. Do you want to talk about how you did that? And
Sure. I love New York. New York City is probably my favorite place on the planet. I don't live there right now, but I probably wouldn't do a great job of living there right now. It's a little crowded for my taste. But every place in New York is like a tiny village. And there are people that never leave their village, which is kind of strange. If you think of New York and you get a visitor there and they're like, oh, we want to go to this restaurant uptown, and then we want to go to this place downtown, and we want to go to this museum. And you talk to people who have lived there all their lives, and they're like, yeah, I've left this square block twice. So there are these, hello puppy, hello. There are these little villages. She's an attention hog, sorry. And the fact that Williamsburg, it is a village, and it feels completely different than the next neighborhood over or the next neighborhood over from there.
That's so cool. And so why Brooklyn? Why did you first decide Brooklyn?
Mostly because Brooklyn is very hip right now. And I spent a lot of time in Manhattan and Staten Island. I spent some time in Brooklyn. I spent some time in Jersey. But Brooklyn is very artistic, and Brooklyn is very young. And it's getting to the point where all the artists and the young people are priced out of Brooklyn. And I kind of wanted to write about it before that happened completely, because gentrification has taken over. And some neighborhoods that were very artsy are now Wall Street, basically. And neighborhoods that were very family oriented are now Starbucks. So kind of wanted to capture it while it was still there.
So cool. I'm glad you did. I like it. I feel like I've been there.
Good. That's what I'm trying to do. I think there you go. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
She has to be the center of attention, which she's a good girl. So, go ahead.
So I wanted to ask you one question, especially, which is your friendship. So one of my favorite things is when I read books with strong female friendships and relationships, because I just think it's so cool. And for you, you have Odessa and Izzy. And I really thought that their relationship was almost the center of the story. And I don't know, was it intentional to showcase a strong friendship like theirs for you?
I don't think I did it on purpose. Like I wasn't making a statement or coming up with anything like that. But I do know that I wouldn't be where I am without my friends. And even like this year I have met some amazing people, yourself included, that I would not have been able to get through this year without it. I've got a debut writer group, the Berkeley. It's probably got a couple of them making comments right now, probably very appropriate comments, I'm assuming. And whenever I moved to New York, a friend of mine kind of took me under her wing and said, okay, let's teach you how to survive. And so that is part of it. And there's actually like multiple people that have contributed to Izzy because of the strong female friendships, and the people that really go, oh, this city's going to eat your lives, sweetheart. Let's do something about that.
You had an Izzy. Well, you've had many Izzies, many people that combined to make Izzy.
Yes.
Well, I loved it. Yeah.
I couldn't let Odessa just flounder around. And the great thing is, Izzy she's not charitable. She's not out there, just to help everybody. She's out there to help herself. She's out there to survive. And there are times that she starts to take advantage of Odessa, and Odessa turns around and it's like, oh, you need $20? Here's $40. And so then Izzy's like, well, I was going to teach you how to make this meal, but now I'm going to take you out to this restaurant. And so it kind of feeds on itself, on their friendship, and makes me happy.
Well, yeah. And their dialogue, I think writing that sort of dialogue and that friendship is just so fun, right? The witty back and forth. And I thought they were just so fun to read about. And it was great.
So Parker brings her best friend to this romantic weekend. So it's the two couples, like you said earlier, and her best friend is hilarious, and she's this big nerd girl, and she's total geek. And I totally agree that Dave Tennant is definitely the best doctor. And she's got Star Wars jewelry that she wears, and she's such a character. What inspired this wonderful geekiness in a character for you?
Oh, Sage is so fun. I love writing her for Parker. And I'm actually more of Sage. I'm like the giant nerd, right? And I've been fortunate enough to have so many great friendships over the years where we connect over these fandoms, and do the midnight releases and all the super nerdy things and the Lord of the Rings marathons, And I think something fun for me is Parker. I'm always having fun with Parker, playing up the well, I don't even know what that is, even though it's the author. I'm like, oh, I do.
It gives you a chance to explain it too.
Yeah. Wait, what was that?
It gives you a chance to explain it, because if somebody isn't in a particular fandom and somebody's, okay, I can't imagine somebody who doesn't know what a lightsaber is, but maybe you do need to explain what a TARDIS is. So to have one character who's not as big of a nerd, and then you got another one who's just letting her geek girl fly, it makes a nice combination.
Fun. And it shows opposites attract. I've had friends over the years too who are not into the things that I am. Like, what are you reading again? And it's fun, because I do think sometimes with friendships there's all different, opposites attract, and that's something fun.
So I have to ask you, what is your fandom?
What is my fandom? Oh my gosh.
What is your fandom?
I'm like a huge Sarah J. Maas fan. I actually have the Throne of Glass coloring book I've been slowly working through. So I love those books. I love the Court of Thorns and Roses as well. And she has a new series. I'm like I went to one of her talks once, because she's just so fun, and I love all of her series. So that's one. Harry Potter, of course. I grew up in the era of that, and Lord of the Rings is a big one. Yeah, there's a whole bunch.
Hey, those are all great. Yeah.
Battlestar, obviously.
Yes.
And one that some people don't always think of as a fandom, but I'm just going to say Jane Austen, right?
Yes.
Sage's last name is Bennett for a very specific reason. It's like, I
meant to ask you about that.
Out. So there's so many. It doesn't always have to be like the, fantasy sci-fi, although that has a place in my heart, but Jane Austen too. What's your fandom? Is it Doctor Who, or is it?
Doctor Who is a big one. Supernatural, in case you didn't get the Sam and Dean joke earlier.
Oh, okay, there it is. Okay.
Love Star Wars. Love Star Trek. I actually watch them both, which kind of makes me like a horrible human being, I guess. I love reading sci-fi, watching sci-fi. Totally gets me. In fact, Berkeley re-released 2 Robert Heinlein books today, and that just made me so happy, because I share a book birthday with them. Sorry, Heinlein. I always mispronounce that. But even hockey, I'm a huge that's got to be fandom for me. I'm always watching hockey, and I slip a bunch of hockey references in. They're very subtle, but my hockey nerd friends are like, oh, I see what you did there.
Isn't it fun slipping those Easter eggs in? I have so much fun with it. I'm like, what hairpin can I give Sage that calls out what do I want to highlight here?
and all of the Easter eggs that fit in with something else that's happening. So if you've got the crossed lightsabers, somebody ends up getting betrayed, and that's fun to be able to weave together. Amber's back.
I love that all the sci-fi and fantasy fandoms you guys have. That's
nerd girl.
Hey, yeah. So we do have some questions, so I wanted to jump back in here and get some of those before you guys. One of them I'm going to kind of tag on to, but Stephanie had asked Kate how many books are in your series, but I also wanted to ask you both, you've each talked about these 2 series. Are you do you just want to keep writing in those worlds, or are you thinking about other series? I'm just kind of curious about tagging that onto this question.
So right now, Mulled to Death will be the third one in the series, and I'm currently working on the fourth one, which will be out probably around this time next year, which is titled "Till Death Do Us Port."
That's so good.
And I really right now I love writing Parker's world. I think it's so much fun to continue, and I keep coming up with ideas for what happens next to all of the characters. I have a feeling even when I write the last book, I'm still going to know like what happens to them. So I would gladly keep writing the series because I really love it, and I think it's so much fun. That being said, I do have other sort of projects. Like I said, I was very prolific in the last year. I don't know. It gave me some writing was something I could have control over when things seemed chaotic. And so I actually even finished another manuscript that's kind of with my agent, and maybe something will come of that. That's a slightly different mystery, but kind of fun. Yeah.
So for me, Odessa started out as a 2-book series, and it may only ever be a 2-book series. So I made sure that while writing it, that I left enough open that we can go back and revisit, but at the same time, I absolutely hate it when somebody like ends on a cliffhanger and then doesn't publish the next book. You're like, that's not fair. But right now, what I'm working on a series that is 3 sisters that live in Austin, and they are reopening their grandparents' record store. And the first book, Kate, hopefully you like this, is called Vinyl Resting Place.
Oh, it's amazing, that title. Yeah.
That I love puns. I'm a cozy writer. What can I say?
Oh, they're great. It's so good.
So we have a question sort of for Bailey Cakes. When is she going to be in a book?
I don't know. That's a good question, Mia. I did write a book that had a main character that had a puggle dog, and that she was central, and that character got me an agent, but nobody liked the book, so it never sold. Maybe I'll fix that up one day, and then the character will be a little bit more like Bailey Cakes.
Maybe you can slip a dog into your next Cozy series. I mean, like even just like walking by outside, and everybody who knows you will know.
We'll be like, that's Bailey Cakes right there.
Yeah. It'll be wanting a treat.
Yeah, just come by and beg for food because she's starving. She's so hungry.
So you guys, the recommendations that you all provided were really great, and there were some others that people dropped into the chat. But Elizabeth asked if there are any other recommendations for cozies that have quirky or offbeat settings.
Yeah. Jennifer Chow's book, the Sassy Cat series, takes place in LA, and that one is really fun.
Definitely. What I'm really looking forward to is Raquel Reyes, and it comes out in 2 weeks. It's set in Miami. It's I'm gonna butcher this. Mambo, Mango, and Murder, maybe.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about,
I've only read teasers. I haven't even got my hands on an arc yet, but I'm really looking forward to that. Also, wow, how many books do I have up here? One of my favorites that I've read this year was Mia P. Manansala, and it's Arsenic and Adobo, and the next one is coming out in a couple of months. And it's a Filipino restaurant, and the meals that she describes in this book just makes me salivate. And she'll go through like step by step making a dessert, and I'm just like looking at a peanut butter sandwich going, Mia, we're gonna have a talk about this. This is not fair. So that's one I recommend to everybody.
Great. I like Elizabeth's second question as well. How do you feel about romance in your cozies?
Clearly, I love romance in cozies. But you have to be careful. Like, you don't want to read a romance novel when you pick up a cozy. And so I always try and, like, when I read a cozy, I appreciate it when the romance is sort of the secondary plot to the actual mystery. And I think any hot and heavy romance you kind of have to have off screen, you know. There's a hot tub scene with Parker and Reed, and it's interrupted very cruelly. So before anything gets too much, because there's that fine balance that I know I have when I read them and when I write.
So I cannot write a romance scene. I just can't. I've tried. It doesn't work. So I love the fact that Cozies have closed door romance. I've got 2,000 ideas for rom-coms that I think are hilarious, and I'd be happy to give them to anybody that wants them, but I will never be able to write a romance. I'm not good at it.
Okay.
So no Parker or yeah.
There's
There's
definitely a connection there, and especially bringing in letting Parker have a girlfriend, maybe even letting Odessa have another boyfriend, but they still have this connection, but never writing a kissing scene. Like, just not gonna do it.
Kissing scenes are the best.
You can write them. I love romance books. They are so much fun, and I can read them all day. Can't write them.
Okay. We have a question from Joanna. What do you start with when you're coming up with an idea for the series? The place, some element of the plot, character?
For me, it's character. Everything is character driven. And once you know a little bit about the character, then everything else just has to be kind of the opposite of that character. So if you've got a character who's very street smart, then you throw him in the woods. I guess I mean,
torture your characters, right?
Yeah.
Give them lots of conflict. Like, I think it's character too for me, but I also tie the setting in a lot, because a lot of it too is what does, I think it's coming up with the character and what they want at the beginning of the story. And then how does, in this case, like a murder happen that goes counter to everything that they want? And how does the setting then tie into all of that too? How it all kind of comes together. But I think I'm with Olivia. It starts with character. You have to start with a character and what they want. And then you can kind of figure out how are they going to be challenged in that way? How are they going to grow through the story? And what plot elements are going to be thrown in there, sort of a wrench.
Great.
Yeah.
I did sort of hint at this, but I didn't ask about if you were thinking with the fandom.
Can I interrupt you just 1 second? Yes. The guy who's asking the question right now, that is my source for everything that is escape room. So I have to give him props right now. He's my escape room source.
Well, so he was interested in all the fandoms too, and so wondering if you had thought about writing sci-fi or fantasy, or if it's just something that you guys love, consuming.
Boy, I have 2 manuscripts. They were how I learned how to write a novel. They're probably like a decade old. They're in a drawer next to me, and I don't think anyone will ever read. I don't want them ever to see the light of day. In fact, I should shred them. I love reading fantasy and sci-fi. Something I found really hard is creating the worlds. And for me, I feel like it gets out of hand. The scope gets to be so much for me. Sometimes I end up kind of frozen. And I find that it flows a little bit more natural when I'm writing stories grounded in reality a little bit. So for me, and I keep gravitating toward those as much as I love fantasy and sci-fi. I don't know if I see myself writing any, at least not in the immediate future, as much as I admire them.
I love urban fantasy. I love werewolves and vampires and all of the dark creatures. And I could write about that all day. But writing an actual like sci-fi that's got world building, that's a lot. That's an awful lot, especially when you've got to have your science system, you've got to have your magic system, you've got to have your political system before you even figure out what your plot is. And that's a lot of work especially there are people who do it so well. And I love consuming that.
Great. Well, you guys are going to have to come back in here and look at a lot of the comments. That people were definitely having fun chatting and enjoying the conversation. One thing that I haven't heard you guys talk about that I think I'd love to end on, if you're all right with this, is just what else you're reading. I mean, obviously we know some of your fandom, but what's right now? What's on your bedside table?
Gosh, in the middle of a lot of books right now.
Me too.
I'm always. I'm reading I'm reading A Good Girl's Guide to Murder right now, which is a young adult contemporary mystery, and I love that series. And Pip in it is really fun, and it's kind of true crime, which I think is or has like a sort of play on that. I'm also have Thursday Murder Club. I'm kind of in the middle of reading that one as well. That's sort of my nighttime read. I don't know if anybody else divides it up in that way, but some make it so I don't have I can sleep at night.
So I'm just finished a draft of a manuscript, and while I'm drafting, I can't read. And so I've got this pile of to be read that I'm finally able to start on. And the one I just started on is Midnight Hour. It is a collection of cozies by authors of color, and it is fantastic. I've only gotten through, I think, 3 stories at this point because I haven't been reading as much, and I am completely hooked. I'm like, okay, as soon as this is over, I know what I'm doing. My Kindle is screaming my name right now, and that comes out second week of November, I believe. So arcs are a blessing and a curse because you get to read something and it's fantastic, and then you can't talk about it to anybody who understands. Like, I had a chance to read Kate's book and I was just like, this is amazing, and I'm trying to scream about it, and everybody's like, I can't find it, and I'm like, well, just wait, it'll be out.
You're like, go start with the first ones in the series, and then you'll be all caught up by the time the third one comes out.
But I love short stories because it gives you a chance to meet new authors and go, instead of investing $16 in a book, you buy a short story and you're like, hey, I really like this author, and then I'll buy their whole catalog. So.
Good tip. All right, you guys, that was so much fun. And folks commented that you guys were very fun together. And somebody also said maybe you should collaborate on something, and Kate can write the romance part. So.
I'll write all the kissing scenes.
Feel free. You can have all the kissing scenes. Now, Kate actually reached out and introduced herself to me a couple of months ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and we started chatting. And I'm a huge fan. And Kate, I think you're wonderful. So
right back at you. This has been awesome. Yeah, you know what it was like? I think it was a couple months ago. I was like, ooh, I've been following you for a while. I love following lots of authors too. I just think it's great to support each other and to have this network.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw you had a release on the same day as mine, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to do something. And I'm so glad we did. This was so much fun. So thank you so much, Amber and Olivia, and everybody who joined in and asked such wonderful questions. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.